What's up, everybody? If you're new here, my name is Emily and I like to talk about books. And today we're going to talk about classic literature that I read during high school. I will not be able to cover every single book I read in high school, or every classic book I read in high school, so I'm just going to hit some of the ones that really stuck out to me. These are not all required reading, although a lot of schools have these books as required reading. I just read a lot of classic lit in high school because I was that person. So we're going to talk about them. I'm going to rate them on a scale of 1 to 5 stars, 1 being the worst and 5 being the best. And let's do it. We're going to go as chronologically as I can remember. One of the first books we read was the Odyssey, freshman year. It was long. I remember we skipped around a lot. I've always been a huge Greek mythology nerd, and so for me reading the Odyssey, before high school. And so for me, reading the Odyssey was really enjoyable because I already knew a lot of what they were talking about. I was familiar with the story. I know a lot of people did not like this book, but I really liked it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I loved the Odyssey. Okay, so this one I did to myself. We would have required reading and then book clubs. I wanted to read Wuthering by Emily Bronte. It was fine. I feel like I partially only wanted to read it because her name was Emily and my name is Emily. So when I read this book, I was 14 and I was so confused because they never explained, as far as I remember, they never explained that there were 2 Catherines and that there were 2 timelines going on back and forth. And I was so confused, and I remember going up to my teacher and being like, what is happening? And even she was like, I don't know, I haven't read this book. And I was like, it's a book of its time. I would reread this book, but I was so confused. And I think it kind of ruined it for me, and that is my fault. And I can't be mad at anyone else but myself, and it's fine. The story was fine. There was romance, there was heartbreak, there was death, as there is always in the moors of England. I'm gonna give it 3 out of 5. 3 out of 5 stars. I'm skipping ahead. I'm not covering every book I read. These are the big ones. So, moving ahead to sophomore year. The first book I remember reading in sophomore year was The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. I'll be honest, I hated this book. I remember she assigned it to us, and my teacher was like, alright everyone, this was about the meat packing company, and it was written as a political piece, and it isn't going to be that interesting, but we have to read it. That was a really bad example. It was a political piece, it was a statement, and it brought to light all these issues that the meat companies were, because the people were dying. Look, I love and appreciate what this book was doing. I will not argue that point. This book was an important piece in history to bring to light issues that were happening in the country and the bad things that were happening in these factories. And with it, I understand, and I hated this book. I kind of feel bad because here's the thing, it's not that the book was bad, I just couldn't read it. So this was one of those books when I was in high school that I would read it under the understanding that it was an assignment and I had to read it, but nothing would stick in my brain. I couldn't retain anything that this book was saying. The way that Upton Sinclair writes, I had a really hard time interpreting it, retaining it, and applying it, I guess, is the best way to put it. I just had a really hard time getting into reading this book. There are a lot of classic lit books that I have no trouble being in that world. It reads like modern literature, and it's not that because this book is old, it's bad, or that I didn't like it because it was old. It was just something about the way he wrote it that, my brain just did not handle it. I'm not opposed to trying to read it again. I just have other things I would rather read now. 1 out of 5. I don't have, hard feelings about it. It's not like it was a bad book. It's not like I hated it because, bad things. I just really did not like this book. I'm sorry, Upton Sinclair. Continuing sophomore year, The Great Gatsby. No hate for me, okay? Don't come after me. When I read this book in high school, this was like my favorite thing on the planet. And like, I was an F. Scott Fitzgerald. Like, I thought he was the sun and I was the universe and I would follow him anywhere. And then, now that I'm out of college, I realize he's not that great of a guy. And the way that the women are written is just kind of And The Great Gatsby is a good story, and I love that Nick Carraway is the narrator. I have written many discussion papers about this book. I have had many discussions about this book with people. The imagery, the symbolism is great. The story is good. I think I already said that. It's just that I reflect on it, and I'm like, there were better books. And I wonder how much of it I really liked just because it was F. Scott Fitzgerald, and I thought that that was a personality trait. I'm really coming for myself right now. Wow. I would read this again. I remember, I have this distinct memory so before we had finished the book, of telling my teacher, I just really relate to Daisy and the way that she views women in this time period. And I just really relate to her. I think she's kind of a badass. I also think I had an unhealthy, want to be in love with Gatsby, even though there are some, real issues with that. That's a whole issue in and of itself. I don't know, when did you first start loving toxic men? I'm gonna give this book 3 out of 5 stars. Okay, so I don't own any of the books that I read junior year, but we can talk about them briefly. Junior year was the year that I discovered how much I loved Agatha Christie, and I read Murder on the Orient Express. An amazing book, 5 out of 5 stars. And I finished it in a week, and we had a month to read the book. Loved that book. We also read, so my teacher pronounced it Gawain, so it was Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, I think is what it was, and it was about the Knights of the Round Table. I really don't remember that book at all. It wasn't one that really held my interest. I read it because I was supposed to, and it was fine. Next, I read Brave New World. I read this one on my own during high school because it was a book that everyone talked about, it's classic lit. You need to read classic lit. If you want to be educated, you need to read classic lit. This is the basis for all dystopian novels. Like how people talk to you in high school about reading literature? Okay. This wasn't required reading. It is a book that I picked up on my own. This is another book similar to Wuthering Heights that when I was reading it, I just didn't, something in my brain did not compute with this book. It just, there was a wire missing. And it's another book where I reread this in college, and even then I was like, okay, I get it, but I don't understand what's happening. I don't know why my brain does this with certain books, but there's something in it that I understand the story. I know what's going on. I watched John Green's Crash Course about this 5 times, and I know what's happening, but when I read the book, it doesn't make sense. Maybe I just need to read it again. But I probably won't. But I can have lengthy discussions about it and the way that it has influenced modern literature and or how similar we are to the society in this book. But I probably won't reread it. 3 out of 5. On a similar note, I read 1984. This was another book I read on my own. This was a recommended book, but it was not a required reading in any of my classes that I took. Better than Brave New World. I remember reading it and enjoying it. I thought it was interesting. I loved seeing how George Orwell envisioned the future and how close he was. It's kind of scary. I'm gonna give this one 4 out of 5. I liked this one a lot. Thanks, George. Oh, another book I read junior year. This is another book that I would be willing to reread this book. Fahrenheit 451. This is when my love of dystopian novels really came through, and talking about, burning books, and very similar to the themes of 1984 and Brave New World, and having a totalitarian government or those kinds of I really liked Fahrenheit 451. I don't think we talk about Fahrenheit 451 enough. I'm gonna give Fahrenheit 451 4 out of 5 stars. I would reread it. It was so short. Why are we not reading that book anymore? I don't know. If you want to talk about it, let me know. Senior year of high school is when I took a class called Heroes in Classic Literature. And this, probably my favorite class of my high school career. We went from oldest to newest in terms of when they were written, which was really cool. So we got to see like how over time the way that we presented heroes had changed but also stayed the same. Fascinating. I know. So I don't have the exact translation that we read, but first we started with the Iliad, and I loved the Iliad. I may like the Iliad more than I like the Odyssey. That may be a really unpopular opinion because there's literally a chapter in the Iliad that's just counting how many soldiers or people in the army are from each city-state or whatever. But the story of Achilles and Patroclus, the Trojan War, and I loved the Iliad. Greek mythology, I'm telling you, it never left. I'm still obsessed with it. 5 out of 5. What did I give the Odyssey? Okay, whatever. The next book we read, these are all pretty much going to be from this one class, by the way. Beowulf. And this was really cool because we had the whole mini section on about the English language and how it has changed from sounding a lot like German and like Scottish, and how it like shifted over time. And we would read the first page in Old English, and I don't remember too much about this book itself. I know that Grendel gets slayed by Beowulf and he's the hero, and yeah, that's about it. I don't know, it was fine. I don't really have any qualms with this book. I would reread it. I probably won't anytime soon because I'm not dying to reread it and I have other books I want to read, but definitely not a bad book. 3 out of 5 stars. This was the last book we read in Heroes in Classic Lit. So we read Hamlet by Shakespeare, obviously. I love Hamlet. I have no qualms with Hamlet, and maybe that's because I'm a huge theater nerd, and Ophelia would be a dream role, and whatever. But I love Hamlet, and we read it in class, and I really, really enjoyed it, and did not have an issue with it. I remember the thing about Hamlet that was really cool was just dissecting the different ways that Shakespeare can be portrayed, the different ways you can portray Hamlet, the different ways that you can view Hamlet as a hero or an anti-hero, and the relationships within the story. I love Hamlet. Yeah. Hate to say it. Love to hate it. 4 out of 5. 4 out of 5 stars for Hamlet. Thank you, Hamlet. Last but not least, well, maybe, Lord of the Flies. I read this on my own in your year of high school. It's very short. I really enjoyed reading this book. I read it in like a day. So I have to be honest, it's been like 5 years, so I don't remember that much. But this is another one of those books similar to Great Gatsby where I loved the symbolism and the imagery and the way that the author was able to tell a story within a story, was able to tell a story hitting on a theme in society without just kind of throwing it in your face, and talking about issues, social issues, or in this case, how if you leave young boys alone in the wilderness, they will resort to violence. Poor Piggy, my heart and soul, my son, Piggy, he deserved better. I don't have too many thoughts on The Lord of the Flies. Like, it's fine. It's fine. 3 out of 5. So, what books did you love to read in high school? What books did you hate reading in high school? I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, feel free to like the video and subscribe to my channel. I try to post a video every week.